Tu sabi nga. Hi. Tu show you. Tu ba? Okay. In your tool. Oh.
All right, it's 6 o'clock. Welcome to Finance Committee of the Whole, meeting number 2. The only change to the agenda is to address that change from meeting number 3 to meeting number 2. So I'd look for a motion to adopt the agenda. Councillor Akomanik moves, Deputy Mayor seconds. We'll get a show of hands, all in favor. And Sheila on the phone?
Yes, I'm in favor. Thank you.
Thank you. Unanimous. There's no minutes. Any declaration of interest this evening? Seeing none, we'll move right into new business with a request for decision, property tax exemption request. Amy?
Good evening. The city received a letter from the Okotoks Society requesting an exemption from their property taxes for their new buildings that they have purchased and are very close to completion. And it's my understanding they'll be moving in the fall. So the properties are Lot 4, Block 44, Plan 4625, known as Building 1077. And this building will be used as a men's shelter as well as transitional housing. The taxation assessed for the 2020 year, and this is based on the incomplete building, so is $15,563. And there is also a second building on the there's also a second building associated with the men's shelter, and this is Lot 5, Block 44, Plan 4625, known as Building 1079. And this building will be used for affordable housing, so approximately 45% of the building, as well as program space for the shelter. And the assessment for 2020 was $30,102.49. So the Okotoks Society, as you know, is a nonprofit society, and they do offer a vital service to the community. They work to provide shelter and as well as reduce homelessness and provide associated programs. There is a policy, there is some policy implications in City Bylaw 669, as well as under the Property Assessment and Taxation Act for Nunavut. And there is an additional clause that we're looking into. If you look under H here, it says this is from the Exemption Act, Property Assessment and Taxation Act, used by societies and incorporated under the Societies Act, except for any land, improvement, or mobile unit that is used as a residence. So unfortunately, we weren't able to obtain clarification on the residence and if affordable housing space is considered a residence in this case. Before the meeting, we weren't able to determine that. So we may wish to defer this number 2, the second part, until we receive clarification on that. So the options that would be before you tonight would be to approve the exemption for both buildings, but also to obtain clarification on that section of the act before exempting the second building, or to approve a partial exemption. So council could look at options such as exempting the improvements but not the land, or something to that effect, or not to approve an exemption at all. And so the estimated loss in property tax revenue is approximately $31,000 for each property once complete. Thank you.
Any comments or questions initially? Mayor Bell?
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. I would move to approve a partial exemption. The full exemption for the first building. And then direct staff, the motion would be to direct staff to look at an affordable housing tax bracket for the city of Iqaluit moving forward. And once that is done, we can give that to this second property. That would be my move.
Deputy Mayor seconds that motion. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Awa?
Renamik Exota. Tabungorong ito kay ajigay kitinamik nunalipoyo edwane sumatuin naksunga. Takwato kinoyorok tunasong ito paravit tamakwang mata. Kanok atunik karuk temen nelyo unnak petaw baru na ajigay gara unnak petakwa kinoyorok tunasong ito nunak nunamik atok tu teman nunalipoyo renamik Exota.
For myself, I'd say we are able to treat each group differently. There's different levels of government at play supporting in different ways. With homelessness being such an issue in Iqaluit, as are many other issues, but the city provides no direct financial support to homelessness in Iqaluit. We provide some administrative support with flow-through funding from other levels of government. So this would be the first step and the only direct financial assistance the city provides directly to homelessness in Iqaluit. Do you have anything to add to that, Amy? Or?
No, the city currently does offer exemptions to other groups through its bylaw. Examples of that would be religious organizations, with the exception of a residence, if there's a residence on that property, and a couple of other nonprofit groups. In that bylaw, there's a schedule attached to that bylaw that of the groups that the city has supported, nonprofit registered societies that the city has decided to support through tax exemptions.
Councillor Akumalik?
Thank you. I'm going to support this motion. I think this is a good idea. However, I have a couple questions. My first question is, if we go ahead and support this, and if we make a wrong decision, what's the liability?
I don't see any long-term liability from this. It's the exemption would be renewed every year by bylaw. If a future council or this council wanted to change that decision, they have the opportunity to do so every year. Amy?
So thank you. So just to be clear, we are asking for this decision here tonight, but there would still need to be, the bylaw would still need to be amended to include this group, and that would be brought to council at a next meeting. And you'll see the schedule in that bylaw that lists all the groups that are exempt at this time.
Follow up.
Thank you. And my other question is, are we infringing any clauses in CTV Act?
The CTV Act, I don't believe we've identified any issues there. Our own bylaw has an issue that we're trying to clarify in regards to the residences. So we need to clarify if that affordable housing portion of that lot is considered a residence. And that's the what we need to clarify before we can move on that second part. Councillor Stevenson?
Thank you. Can you clarify, or perhaps Amy clarify, that bylaw 669, that there's a trigger? I don't remember the trigger for every year reviewing those who are on it. So if there isn't, then what would be the trigger for a property to then come back to council to make sure that we still felt they should be exempt?
So in my review of the bylaw prior to the meeting, all of the groups remain on that list unless council decides to remove them from the list through a bylaw amendment. So the groups that have been there are groups that have been on that list for many years. So yeah, through the bylaw amendment process, any changes would be made that way.
Thank you. And I'm not referring to sort of a whim of council to change. I'm more referring to, the possibility that 3 or 4 years down the road, 10 years down the road, a building might get used for a different purpose than it currently is. There are plenty of religious organization buildings on that list that maybe they get repurposed. Is there anything, there's nothing obviously built into that bylaw that triggers reviews even every 5 years or something to make sure that those people still deserve exemption, or those organizations, still deserve exemption.
If the committee wishes to make a recommendation to that effect to amend that bylaw to include a review timeline, that can certainly be done, and it would be timely given that if this recommendation moves forward, then we would be amending the schedule to that bylaw, so we could include another amendment quite easily.
I might have been mistaken when I said that. I remember we reviewed that list right after we did our financial statements last year, and I might have thought that we did that automatically every year, so apologies for that. Anything further, Councillor Stevenson?
No, I guess I'd make that recommendation after this motion.
Councillor Nuttall? Deputy Mayor first.
All right, Nakamik. I would only add that that we encourage Ukutak to list this as an in-kind contribution, and the other concerns I had were spoken to by other people. So thank you.
Councillor Nuttall.
Ja, ila tamage komitri tasiming taking a beer water the many things to look out of make it. Ama okotak to Sakta Robert Maria Claro, Sanguia Gadlita, Tapatamagapu, Maria Akakara Lugo, Kachiu, Yakaruni taxi and it to Takami. So Ubunga Kodikila Tako, Tuksak Vilemat, Ajing it Queen, Ajing it Kurapatam, Tunamot taxi and Imata. Tamqua Ukosaka Sumangatio, Ubanga Trisha Sumangataka. Tamqua Kino Jereo Shorty with you, Shulu time, Ikaruni, Amishkulang Mata, Kino Yerogati, Tapogonura in the Ikiakutu, Ajing it too. Takoremat Marigara, Ilon of Tena Luigi, Atlantico, and at Lewidley. Isumana Yatua, Marigara, King Leo Hungineko. Marigara Akatira Logo, Takua, Keno Yero Asuati, Noreni Ikeote, Kachiubat, Ekarune. Takua, Narajero Lushuro Ataticuologi. Nigitang illuidly Ataticutia, my taxi and illutic. Tatsuming Maria Rami, Pimaya Tuma, so I sang in that time, so I among them, Tamelio Tiki Yagatana. agla tamakwa kiusaini tamayak tangmuta nigitiarlugit akikirat gaklungito suglu temeyu una Maria Gala Pimangonopak Tana Okotak Tabung Elena Tio Maria Gala Tanda 669 Akishutiakarok Lugo Temet Munayatunga Tana Suklupigu Jayana Tio Okota Temet Tuninga Ikutayo Maninga Kiro Yoro Sagotik Tabung Ikiyokti Amrutem Ashingin Ikiyokti Mata Kino Yurungit Talk Sulu Yagatob Yagatoa in Takarabot Koyamarotunga Kukina Akshu no Tinning Tachiming Okatunga Maria Gala Akitia Karalugo Ishumungo Ayakunga Teme Yimo Tachimga Sulu Lumi Jotine Okota Taxi Yakuneka Ril Punayato Tabuga Teme Yimo Tunatua Ikiyok Jakung Itakatana Temuto.
Any other comments or questions before we call for a vote? Councillor Flaherty, do you have any comments or questions?
Just a comment, Chair. I apologize. I might have had a question, but I apologize for not understanding Councillors Awa and Naka when they're speaking in this group, and I realize that there's limitations because I am calling over the phone, so I apologize for that. But I'm voting. I'll be voting in favor just because I'm not. You can't see my hand raised.
Thank you. I'll still call on you to make it official momentarily. So, with the clear motion, we're clear with the motion. Everything's good there. All right. So I'll call for a vote. All those in favor. And Councillor Flaherty. Councillor Flaherty's in favor and opposed. And Councillor Nutta. 2 opposed. Motion carries. Second item on the agenda is our 2020 mid-year financial statements.
I'd like to make a recommendation just following that motion that recommends that administration add to the bylaw when we review it, that there be a timeline for review. I think of 3 years, but you could talk with our finance department too about what's most reasonable and come back with a suggestion if you didn't think every 3 years was reasonable. But reviewing the tax exemption list, what is it, an annex, Schedule A, excuse me, reviewing Schedule A, that council need to review Schedule A every 3 years.
Mayor Bell seconds. Any comments or questions? Councillor Kumlik.
Tana piwi galwang mayaga. Talimanung makipagdi. Piwi ang makayalo kayakta. Pingasiuni akpakanin kila. Pingasu akgaro kilamigulong mata. Imelitun na koyo mata. Kuya nami.
Councillor Nutta.
And mamera urang hawati tuksi nungiman. Temeyo. Tana solo akagwit tisaman. Isivaya kata ubone. Tema akagut pingasut. Nukagera lutero. Tagugera lutero. Solo akagut taldeman. Sokay manglugar. Sokay ma. Nukay sungata akagwit tisaman nagawit. Aksulun anguti atuna tatas mga kanunda yak pala ito. Akagut pingasut. Quinlan makes vote.
Councillor Stevenson?
Thank you, and I appreciate both councillors' suggestions. I mean, I would like to let administration at least think about it. It's kind of been thrown at them and they could come with a recommendation. I suggested 3 years because of our term length and the fact that 5 years would mean that you could feasibly never have a look at that, but in 3 years, then you're guaranteed in any term to see it. I was even thinking every 2 because then you see it twice, but anyway, that was the reason for my suggestion of 3 years, but I figure we should just let administration think about it for a bit. They usually have more expertise than us just jumping into ideas.
Myself, I'd like to see it more regularly, actually. It's an addendum. It's just a list of properties that are being exempted. It's not an in-depth policy review. It's just a matter of verifying that list. And if it's annually or every 2 years, I think would actually be better. It's not a full bylaw review unless we're changing something. Mayor Bell?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I think we should do it a little bit, a lot more than 5 years, even probably more than 3 years. It's like 13 names on the list. It would take us 35 seconds at a meeting to decide. If we wanted to remove one, then it would be a little bit harder, but I don't think it wouldn't take us long. It would be nice to see it quite often.
Councillor Kumalik?
Yeah. Pingasungotano okauyaga kikiago magaruaga teko angikakakatang tui pitchu tikitluki nokkagaruagutta naguartaukanni karuagutta kikiaksimarigillugu kengullermi katimayingu tunu aaqqiksimapagiertuviniuruni taima isimaqqaugama qaniuginkillugu aqaaguni pingasuna ubalunni 3.5 qanukia.
I'm sure administration will bring us options to consider. Any further comments or questions? All right, I'll call for a vote. Those in favor? Unanimous in the room. Councillor Flaherty?
Sorry, just unmuting. I'm in favor.
Thank you. Motion carries unanimously. Now moving on to the second agenda item, the 2020 mid-year financial statements. Amy, would you like to present?
Just that we had the financial statements prepared by Lester Landau and worked with our finance team on ensuring everything was completed, and we're quite pleased that we've been able to produce the second quarter statements. If you have any questions, we'll do our best to answer those now, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Amy. Thanks for all the work that went into preparing these. The statements look very good and very strong considering the type of year the city's been dealing with. Are there any comments or questions from the floor on the financial statements? Councillor Kumalik?
First of all, thank you to the staff who are working with these numbers. I think for most part, COVID-19 has affected us and slowed a lot of things down. However, when I was looking through these statements, I have some questions. Since I've been on the council, we've always dealt with bad debts, and especially with the ambulance services. I know that when we get foreign visitors or foreign patients that land to Iqaluit on emergency basis, we could never collect those invoices from the other countries or from the passengers. So I'm just wondering if that line item has been dealt with, or if not, how else can someone suggest how we can eliminate that? And secondly, when you say bad debts, what does it mean in those statements? Thank you.
Amy, do you want to address?
Yes, it is difficult to collect from people who use services, the ambulance service, if they're coming from another country. I don't think that's the city's main, I guess, issue in collecting for various things. The city is working on dealing with some of its bad debt. So bad debt is basically debt that we're not expecting to collect. And so some of that we'll be working to write off, and there's a process for that we have to go through with the government in Nunavut to get some of that off our books. To collect from somebody who's, say coming in from a medevac, that can be very difficult without, asking for upfront payment when somebody's hurt. It's not something we do on an ambulance. So, there may be times where we may be offering that service and it may be difficult to collect from somebody from, say, another country. But I wouldn't say that's the majority of our collections issues.
Any other comments or questions? Oh, Councillor Awa.
Thank you, Chairman. Una apik ko tiki tuin nong yak kutaka tanna nung John on 19 pidjuti libu kino yanik tunak kay katakata takuno nuna rakutikinyo. Ukwa kami kwa suga kano ko yung kisiane imaka kanayak ti ujik sa kayangan. Tako sidikut uluran kamipan ubunong ni namang nakopita ko yung naming kiswata.
Financially, based on these statements, we're very, very strong right now. The money that the city has given out, it's all flow through generally from the federal government in most cases. We're just facilitating federal government programs. They give the city money, we send it out. So based on these statements here, I think we are in a better position, excuse me, this year than a lot of municipalities across the country right now, and it's actually fairly strong financial results year to date. Would you add anything to that, Amy?
Thank you. I would just add that because of the strong position that we are in recently, that has allowed the city to weather the storm. So you'll see in the next presentation that with some budget reallocations that we're presenting, that there were some losses that we've incurred due to lost revenue in some of our areas as a result of COVID. But because of our a stable financial position that we are now in, we were able to get through that, and we're still in a good position. So while we may have lost some revenue, we've been able to adapt, but also the city's stable financial position has helped us.
Perhaps a follow-up question to my first one. I'm a new person here. I mean, almost a year now, but we have very few meetings. There's also my first time seeing the financial statement within the city. And I heard part of the meetings that we have been sued for things like that. Are we in a position where we'll be able to flow through, or shall we need to kind of changes the sort of services, or are we okay? Thank you.
So for the majority of the services that this city offers are essential services that need to continue and need to be maintained. There are some services that have adapted to the COVID realities. And I think at the next item, Stephanie's here in case there are any questions for her on the recreation, because the majority of the impact that the city's seen is in the area of recreation because our facilities were closed. And so I think that we need to continue the course. Our staff did an excellent job delivering essential services through the time where COVID impacted us the most during the shutdowns. And we do have an obligation to deliver those essential services, but we were able to do them very efficiently actually during the COVID season. So we're quite proud of that work that our staff has done. And then other areas are working to adapt some of their programs and so on. But we can talk about that at in the next item if that's okay. And we can also have Stephanie will be available for some questions as well.
There's no other questions. I would ask for a motion to recommend to council to approve these statements, so we can table them in council. Councillor Awa moves. Councillor Stevenson seconds. Comments or questions? Councillor Kumalik.
Thank you. I was just wondering about Jomi Court. If that included sanitation and land development.
Can you clarify what page you're looking at?
Land development on Schedule 1, $488,700.
Amy?
Okay, so Schedule 1 is the consolidated schedule of changes in the accumulated fund balances. As it stands, the closing balance for these statements is $4,800,000 or so, and so this is what's currently in the land fund, and the Jomi Court funds are expensed through this fund. So the city's land development costs are included in the subdivision expenses, if that answers your question.
Yeah, it's Schedule 5, page 10.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Details
I thought we were talking about
revenue and
Schedule 1.
expenses for land development.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so you're looking at, Schedule 5 then, on page 10?
That's where the number he was asking derives.
Yeah, exactly. So these are the details, and then it rolls up to Schedule 1.
Any further comments or questions before we vote? Councillor Kumalik?
Just a technical question maybe to you. Does the netbook change the picture of the whole thing?
The balance sheet is a little bit wonky, but that's our net position is basically the city's balance sheet, because it takes into account all of our roads, infrastructure, and everything else. So that number is going to fluctuate kind of wildly every year anyways. What I find the most important document on this, instead of the individual schedules, is the schedule of fund balances. That Schedule 1 for the changes in the fund balances, because that tells you, the change in fund balance is the revenue, profit or loss, basically, on each one of our reserve funds, or not all reserve funds, on all of our funds. And then, the closing balance is the total that we're carrying essentially in value in each of those funds. So to me, that Schedule 1 is probably the most important page of the entire document. And seeing no more questions, the motion is to recommend to council to approve the mid-year financial statements. All in favor? Unanimous in the room. Councillor Flaherty?
I'm in favor, Chair.
Thank you. Carried unanimously. On to our third item, request for decision, Nakulawit Emergency Services budget amendment for additional staff and reduction in overtime and overtime reallocation staffing model report. Our Director of Emergency Services, Jeff Spriggs, is here to present.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. What we're looking at is a request for decision for an amendment to the budget for 2 new emergency service staff positions by reducing the overtime budget for this year, for the remainder of this year. And this will be to better meet the needs of the community as the service increases are growing, consistent with the community strategic plan. We're seeing an increase in medical calls and an instance where we're receiving more than one call at the same time, and that's increasing the staffing demand needs in the platoon structure that we have currently. This structure, we currently have 2 platoons with 4 staff and 2 platoons with 5 staff, and by making them uniformly 5 staff, we'll be able to better operationally manage the system and the scheduling that's associated with it. And there's no additional funds needed for the proposal that we have. It's just a reallocation of the budget to allow for this. In fact, I believe we should be able to see a savings across the board because the staffing levels being set and stable should allow us to less often run into instances of reduced staffing that requires the overtime to backfill it. So, is there, I think, any questions at this point?
Look to the floor for any questions. I think this is a great proposal. If we're going to get 2 new staff members and the net cost is only going to be $20,000, that $20,000 is worth more than the relief that's going to be provided to the members. So I would definitely be in support of this. I saw a hand raised on the other side. Was it Councillor Akumelik?
Yes, thank you. Apagayuma takwa mako kanayak tataganyak te wot inyunyak mangati.
Thank you for that question. We've committed to the Inuit employment plan for the city. So the hope is that for future staffing, not just these 2 future staff, but for future staff that come to the department, that we have a plan to do recruitment and retention of career Inuit staff. This plan allows us the opportunity to do that with the coming 2 staff, if there's qualified candidates available. And then within the staffing report, we've outlined our strategic plan for increasing Inuit staffing in our future hiring with the succession planning associated to that. So we're targeting Inuit staffing for our volunteer ranks as well and for our junior firefighters. And I think that's really important to be able to show a progressive plan and some of the partnerships that we have with other agencies like the Office of the Fire Marshal to do training that allows for translated services and translated documents so that we can better have opportunities for community members to participate in the emergency services.
Thank you. So do I understand you will hire Inuit?
I think what I'm saying is the intent is to be able to hire Inuit, but our staffing requirements need to be able to meet the safety requirements for all of the requirements for both the fire and the medical side of the job. So provided we have qualified candidates who can meet that requirement, then yes. Knowing that that has been a challenge for the organization, that's why we've been specific about targeting our training program and our future planning so that we have that opportunity for more people to be recruited for that position.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Nata.
La ukoshikino kuto. Tana jamunga amari cholo bunga saiban kaya makongi tamba. Tachamne makutunga kata yamaga kutaro kwa kishikuina kanga chichuron do tuabat na tuluro inuriksin ikanamlo ane tu naglimak dengan ikem. Unari mana nubugiwalok ya nari mangitara. Solo tekwa asibot silpa makotebot tuabat turai kotegi yengit anu ka hamota. Sepunya solo tala kalau ingin kita kena waktu itu kurapan. Nanti aku makan tu saya tamat tu menga anu kana teku dengan aduk tasod.
Well, thank you for the question. Related to the personal protective equipment, as you've mentioned, there's been increased needs because of COVID-19, and we've done work with our purchasing department to ensure that we do actually have all the required PPE. It's also in coordination with the medevac service with Keewatin and with QGH, so the hospital staff. So we are using the same PPE across all three services when we're providing that. And we've been working with Dr. Patterson specifically to make sure that all of the precautions we're taking are in line with the best practices currently for COVID-19, other respiratory illnesses, and other issues that we may face as responders.
Seeing no other questions, I would ask for a motion to recommend this to council. Mayor Bell moves, Councillor Stevenson seconds. Any comments or questions to the motion? Seeing none, I'll ask for a vote. All those in favor? Unanimous in the room. Councillor Flaherty?
In favor.
Thank you. Unanimous. Moving on to our next item, request for decision, 2020 budget amendments. Our CAO will present.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we're presenting a number of 2020 budget amendments to the operational budget. And this is a result of the need to adapt to the changing needs of the city given the COVID-19 pandemic measures. So when COVID hit, of course, we didn't have a specific COVID fund or a COVID allocation code to be able to purchase things, but there were a number of things that we did need to purchase, and so we'd like to go through some of these allocations with you tonight. So the first is as Jeff just explained to you. I've included it in here so that you could see it all in one document. The new emergency services positions and the reallocations there, and then with COVID, we've spent a fair amount of money on things like PPE. So the emergency services department we've purchased gowns for the staff, as well as masks and shields. And we've purchased gloves, we've purchased hand sanitizer, wipes, disinfection equipment, spray bottles, bleach, and so on. And some of the other costs associated with COVID-19 were the purchase of some laptops and equipment to allow staff to work from home should things worsen. So we do have systems in place to ensure business continuity for things like payroll and vendor payments and a number of other essential functions so that staff are able to work from distance if need be. So those are some of the costs that are associated with that COVID-19. And then I'll note a revenue code or a revenue line here. So the government of Nunavut did provide the city with a contribution, an additional contribution of $92,200, and this was to help offset some of the city's expenses that were directly related to COVID, as well as lost revenue. So all of the hamlets and the city received a contribution, and so that was our contribution that we received from the government of Nunavut. Also, the aquatic center revenue, we'd like to see that reduced by $591,900, and salaries reduced by $250,000, which helps offset some of their lost revenue, as well as a reduction in utilities by $150,000. We'd also like to reduce the Arctic Winter Games arena revenue by $43,000, our NATUC arena revenue by $50,000, and special program revenue by $71,000. And we would like to add $15,000 to the capital budget for the purchase of a new envelope machine. And I'm missing a page. I'm missing a section here. What is this? Add a capital item. Oh, sorry. Okay, this is the request from council, or sorry, from I think it was it planning committee or council, to add a capital item for a new general plan and zoning bylaw, in the amount of $160,000. And so I'll just note that if you do have questions so as you can see, the recreation department was the hardest hit department, and so we've made some changes here to the budget to reflect some of those changes. We had some additional or some lost revenue also that we noticed early on at the landfill for commercial tipping fees, but we haven't requested a change there yet because as construction continued and other construction projects are happening, so we anticipate making up some of that revenue at the landfill. So I didn't include that here, so we do expect to make a lot of that back. So I'm also, we do have Stephanie Clark here if there are any questions about the recreation and the strategy that they've adopted to help balance their budget and maintain some revenue and reduce some expenses. Thank you.
That was good work in planning. Thank you, Amy. Mayor Bell's made the motion to move this. Councillor Stevenson seconds. Any comments or questions to the proposal? Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you. I guess my first question would be, is $92,000 the only amount of COVID support that we've received from the government of Nunavut over this whole period? And did we receive money from the Canadian government as well, the government of Canada? Then I have another question.
These are the only funds directed to the city for operations from either of those levels of government. The other funds that the city has received were all flow-through funds to support community organizations, and that was received from organizations such as Reaching Home for Homelessness, NTI for the hygiene kits that the city distributed on their behalf, and some Government of Nunavut wellness funding as well. But this is the only direct funding that the city's received to date from either level of government.
So thank you, Councillor Shepherd. I'd like to then echo Councillor Shepherd's statement that you deserve congratulations for how you managed this period. That's amazing that we were able to keep a budget like we were just recommended to council at the same time as only receiving that small amount of support in that unbelievably difficult time. And then I don't have a question, but I would like to say that I have not been a regular user of the Aquatic Center before the last month, and I've been very impressed with the way that the COVID protocols have been put in place in that building. And yeah, I feel proud to go in there every day and be part of that because it's really being well managed at the moment.
On behalf of my daughter, we would love to see Family Swims again. Dr. Patterson's listening. The motion on the floor. Any further comments or questions? Councillor Kumalik.
Thank you. A question and a comment. What's a envelope machine? That's very costly envelope machine. Just to hit you on the side. How far are we with the community liaison officer position?
Okay, so
I just want to point out that second question is not material to the motion on the floor, so I'm not going to allow that one.
envelope machine? Okay, so the envelope machine is a machine that stuffs papers into envelopes. So for example, pay stubs or mass mailouts for billing. You know, the paper goes in one side, the envelopes are inserted in another side, push the button and it stuffs the envelopes. And ours is over 10 years old and it is no longer functional.
Any other comments or questions to the motion? All right, in that case, I will call for a vote. All those in favor? Unanimous in the room. Councillor Flaherty?
In favor, Chair.
Thank you. Unanimous. And Jeannie's all right in there. I think we'll go on to the second last item. Funeral expenditure for Adam Minuki. Mayor Bell.
Thank you. I bring this forward for two reasons. One, to make it legitimate, and a legitimate expenditure, because we although I did have councilors support, I wanted to make sure that I had council support. So, and I wanted to also make it so it comes from the mayor's budget and the councilor's budget. Correct?
Yes, thank you. So we just wanted to make sure that we're clear on the, we'll just reallocate from the mayor's travel budget and the council travel budget, as council hasn't been able to travel at all this year given the COVID restrictions. So there's the full budget amount, I think 9,000 is left in the council budget, and the mayor has a remaining 2,500 or so in the mayor's travel budget.
The mayor moves those expenses. Councillor Stevenson seconds. Any comments or questions? Oh. Seeing none, all in favor? Unanimous in the room. Councillor Flaherty?
In favor.
Thank you, everyone. Carried unanimously as anticipated. The final item on the agenda is a request for decision I've prepared seeking council's support for administration to draft policy and do the work required to add the cost of Iqaluit burials in the 2021 budget. I'll ask for a motion initially, and then we can discuss it there. Mayor Bell moves. Councillor Equimalik seconds. I've spoken both of them before this meeting tonight to arrange that. So I just want to make a couple things clear regarding my request for decision, based on some questions that I've received from the public since this came out. My intent of this proposal is for burial costs for all Iqaluit to be covered, regardless of race or any other dividing factors. If you live in Iqaluit, want to be buried in Iqaluit, my proposal is that you would be covered under an eventual city-paid funeral. I would like administration to work to lower costs of funeral services by way of negotiating with the current or any future funeral director or service provider in the city. If there are ways to source caskets at a more affordable rate, I know I've talked to SAOs in some Kivalliq communities that are providing materials for residents in their communities at a much lower cost than we see in Iqaluit. I'm open to all recommendations from council to help move this forward, and I'd open the floor to comments and questions. Councillor Awa.
Kuyanamik suwata tan ikayoktakam. Amma ilasi matuinaksunga uminga makungnik nunawu kunni ikayoktoyun nakoktugu. Siwulamik takwa kawimakoktugu nunaragayid community and government services nunarignut government nunarignut hamalakunut kinawian tunaksiaqattarmata takwa kinawiyanga atoktosuungutik tak tamakkununga ilipaktaw yariaqpaktum uwagupeqattaqqunginnat uwanisilikkum taikunanga tuksiqarunnartugut ilagiyaulaqu qatawuyunnarluta amma peqataaniktaa nunavu gavamakkunnittao uvanikitaqarsimayuugaluaq family services taakwa nunalignut qatangutigiinut pijittiqartiit qawimagaluartuma taakwa ikayukkautigiyuugalua taakkununga taapunga toqungiyuleqinnermu pittikillugu ikayukkautigiyugalua immaqa tuksiqarpigiyunnarmiyyavuttao taakkuamaqqu tuksiqarpigiyunnaqqortavut takvani илуверсиниумик саана хуянамик сорта.
Thank you, Councillor Awa. Councillor Stevenson?
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. So I'd like to agree with Councillor Awa that looking for other organizations to help in this effort, once or if we were to move to a point where the city was paying for all, we would never have any leverage to ask for that type of cooperation again. So I think it's certainly worth exploring. It wasn't a question, more of a statement. I'd like to say that I support this motion fully, but knowing that we'll have a lot more opportunity to discuss the details of this once administration has done their effort to discuss it and to explore it and come back with possibilities. And I just wanted to ensure that that's how everyone else felt, that we weren't just blanket accepting this, but that we're looking for options and looking to talk about this in the future.
That's absolutely my intent. Amy?
Just a suggestion, perhaps proposing a motion that speaks to exploring a cost-sharing model with other organizations. That may go a long way to help our case when we're approaching the other governments officially. And then perhaps also a letter, maybe I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but a letter to the organizations by motion of council. And then also I think any recommendation from here should probably be reviewed by the Cemetery Advisory Committee. And yeah, so thank you.
I could include that in my reading of the proposed motion at the end, I guess. Just add it to the existing one on the paper. I have Councillor Natak next.
Yeah, kuilamig takwa mako ang kadina tekang. Ati palangin mata iksimata solo yung kini ikanayak tutukaro tiyo notila wata kina yan ilabakta jutiksitin. Tamakwa kimakutya koko tabut kota nakaisip tutukayikut taikwa ikayapagmata inunik. So nakaisip tutin ng ikayapto taikwa temingitaw ikayapto kupang lawurang mata taisumani kina. So magwa adiyang ituwata ilingit akanayakan itiyamaitu loksimangitut kino yung notisimangitiyato. Tamakwa aksyon shooting bibang matasolo kaya makarok mayo kuya na mastaka taman na ingin ka na kanila tanga solo kure matya na nukang mat ako ng kilaso kino yung ato kaya rot tanda naman na isumangiyakam ni tanda isumukistiyabak isumangiyakam tayo tuksakartaga hanata kino yan ito ikirtayo maruta tema tuksa se nuna ugabang kune agam tukak ne atingin ito muta ikirtayo tuksabut taman na iwataw tuksa ko kayak tong ubutin solo ilangan na ikarun nili aksyon na takmat tayo kung ilatong ikore ikaru sila tana ito ikirtayo tiyak Paul pibang muta akileba katiklu ilangi teme komut teme tamanna sopo koshita ikiboto.
Thank you, Councillor Natak. I've got Councillor Akumalik next.
Inimi tanna sakkitavini piugiyaga piunak pango katawkongmat isimario akik tattinni katimayulluta akkikasuk tattinni katimayulluta piunak pango katawkongmat nagawaktaw jutigilawaktaw ikayoka tagumalluta inakutigiyattinni taanna piunak pango katawkoktu isimario kutiginasuktaw sakkitavini kuyagibagit amma meeyu utamatiming ikiyaqsittiaqattaqma iqqanaayaqtimullu Kisiani ten uqawsiu pilaqqauyuq iluvillerinnermukati majaqala no tamanna qimeqquyauruungittiarluni qaangiinnartauruoqatta tabbuuna akaungit qaarjuktuugalua ingiqqaninga amma qaqasaujakku Facebookkut saqqitau saalilaorninga akerittialaungillugu piugaluarluni ila piulluni akaulluni nunalinnu kisiani sivuvartailuartilluta pilleqiaattinni ilaanni piuyunniisuungunga qanuk ingikkua oqasuuqalluna qimmertuangagu kalitangata ungataanuangaarlugu qanukia teema oqarmatuinneqqaullugu taanna piuyualu atiituuq teema aqqanaajartugu qavisattiarniarput kiinauya taqainnarnia qullugu najagalu meeyuulaorsimagmi ikpiartummi unikkaalaorsimagilluni tappikkuagu ikpiartummi haamalakkami aggaagutama qulini iluverni tikisiaqattormata teemanni ikayuutiqattiasuungumata haamalauyu qinittiaquigaluarmijunga nanisiniaqillutik ikayuutiksani taanna ikayertorniartaqa quyannami.
Mayor Bell?
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. I just want to say, judging by the comments around this table, how proud I am to be part of this group. Especially thank you to you for bringing this forward. We did run to make a change in this community, and this is huge. It is a big change for our low-income citizens and just citizens in general. So thank you very much. I do love that you put it on Facebook to tell people. People have been hurting for a long time, so I do love that you put that post up there and let people know that you planned on bringing that item forward. So thank you for that as well. But I am very proud to be part of this group. Just to be very clear with you all. And then now a point of clarification. The government of Nunavut does assist in some funerals. They do under the care of the Department of Family Services through public guardianship under the guardianship order or under the Child and Family Services Act, on medical travel under the Department of Health medical travel policy, and providing medical travel client escorts and medical escort services under the Department of Health. So they do some, but they don't do any else. So I just wanted to point, not for income support clients, but I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
And my proposal as presented would exclude those from city costs. The GN, we're not letting the GN off the hook for what they're already paying for by any means. So, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just also want to speak in favor of exploring a cost-sharing model for burial costs, and especially with the support of other levels of government that specifically have fiduciary responsibilities towards Inuit, and also non-governmental organizations like the Inuit organizations, I think should also be partners. I think it's an opportunity to do better for families, and it's also an opportunity to set and meet higher standards of service for families in what is often the most difficult times in their lives. And more recently, there have been a number of families in Iqaluit that have experienced undue hardship because of not just because of cost, but also because of the level of service that is being provided, and anything that we can do to alleviate any additional pain that families feel during a time of loss. I think we're showing leadership, and as Mayor Bell said, really being good citizens for the people of Iqaluit. So thank you very much for bringing this issue forward.
Any further comments or questions before we move? Councillor Awa?
When I mentioned earlier, I support this motion. I just want to clarify myself that there are a number of agencies or the governments can provide this. We don't want to become a burden to the city's budget. I also know all of us here sitting in this chamber, we have insurance. For those people who have insurance, may not need this. I don't need this. I have insurance. For those people who don't have insurance, they are the ones that we're looking at. We'll be paying for those. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Awa. So if I can, the motion as written, I would add on to the end and explore cost sharing model with other levels of government, Inuit organizations, and any potential partners. That's acceptable.
Friendly amendment accepted.
Accepted as well. So I'll call for a vote. All in favor? Unanimous in the room. Councillor Flaherty?
In favor, Chair.
Thank you, everyone. I'll have a motion to adjourn. Mayor Bell moves. Councillor Stevenson seconds. All in favor? Unanimous here. And Councillor Flaherty, I assume you're in favor of adjournment?
Yes, I'm in favor.
All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you for calling in.